Hey everyone, welcome back to MDC. Today we're diving deep into SwiftUI forms and learning how to master advanced validation, the kind you'll actually need in real apps, walk through custom rules, live feedback, accessibility tips, and more, all using SwiftUI. Let's go ahead and dive on in. This is what we're going to be working towards today. So we can see here that we have a little personal info app built where the name is required, email, password has a restriction. We even have birthdays and the agreeing to the form. So we'll just go ahead and fill this out real quick. I'll do Bob. We even have the email validation check. So if we did like AOL@AOL.com, we'll finally, recognize that this is a valid address. Even if we did .ca here, our password must have at least 8 characters. We're also using that secure text field so people can't see it. For the birthdays, we actually have to make sure that these are in the past. So if I try to put my birthday to, let's say, May 31st, birthday cannot be in the future, as when I'm recording this, it's May 10th. And we can see that we have to also agree to the terms once we do fix our birthday, and then we can finally submit. You'd then want to, have a pop-up or take them to the next portion of your app. So I'm going to be starting off by creating a new project, but always feel free to add these to your existing projects. I'm going to be doing an iOS app. I'm going to call it Form Validator, and let's go ahead and get started here. So we're going to start off by building a simple SwiftUI form. And the best thing that we could do to start off is actually to create and track all of our variables. So we're going to be making all of these a state private variable. So as we update and as we kind of have the user input, the view will refresh. So let's create a state private var for name. We're going to have this equal an empty string. We're also going to create a state private var here for email. And if there's any other kind of things you want to track or even change while we do this, feel free to do so. I'm just doing this as an example that feels pretty all-encompassing for a standard form. Also do a password, again, an empty string. You could even copy and paste these and then just change the variable name to save time. And this time we're going to be doing a birth date. So we'll actually have it be a private variable. And we'll call it birth date. We're going to have this equal a date with an empty parameters here because we want to have a date value so we can use the date and time picker. And then we're going to track whether or not the user has agreed to the terms or not. So we're going to create a private variable and we can say agreed to terms equals false. If you want to have people enter things like their gender, and you can even have like an array to hold all those values, totally up to you. Okay, next we're going to get rid of our placeholders here. So I'm actually going to get rid of the VStack as well. So we should just have an empty view. You might get a couple errors bouncing back to you saying, hey, we also need a space there. Hey, saying we kind of need to have something within our view here because it's empty. We're going to start off by creating a form and adding our brace. And this is where we're going to be kind of inputting most of our content. And we can even add things like a section to kind of give our form a little bit more of a title. So let's create that section. And we can include some header text. And we can have it say text with the value of personal info. If you want to do like, hey, enter my form, things like that. After the brackets, we're going to add a brace. And this is where we're going to be adding our different text fields. Now, sometimes I'll type it out. Other times, it's also a pretty good idea to go to the view library here and search for our text field. We can drag and drop it on in. Then we kind of already have our placeholder here and our text value. So for the placeholder, we can kind of see on our preview on the right side of the screen here, this is essentially what's going to be that grayed out text, and you can use this to tell people what information you want there. So in this case, we're going to be doing the name, and then for the value, we're going to actually be creating a binding. So we're going to use our $, and then we're going to reference the name private variable up here. This way, we can, any text that's within this text field is going to be updating within this variable. We can go ahead and add some more text fields, so it's up to you if you want to type them out, if you want to grab them from the object library, totally up to you. Let's go ahead and do the email next. And so for the text value here, we've already created that variable of email. And this time, instead of a text field, we're going to be doing the secure field. Because when we use the secure fields for things like passwords, it's going to kind of have those little asterisks, those little dots, so people can't see the value that they're typing, so it's a little bit more secure. We can also add a label here, which needs to be a string value, so I'll say password. And then for the text, we are going to link that to be to that password variable. Something you also might want to do on your email is we can add a dot and we can actually change the keyboard type. And this is really helpful for when we're entering things like email because we actually have a dot email address. If you are curious about the other types of keyboards, you can actually do the dot notation within the brackets. So we can see all the different options here with these K symbols. So there's even one for Twitter, apparently, email address, decimal pad, etc. So I'm going to do the email address here. Okay, we also want to have a date picker for people to choose their birthday. So let's go ahead and add that here. Add a title of birthday. We're going to then add a comma, and this time instead of text and applying the value there, it's going to be the selection, and we're going to reference our binding of birth date. We're also going to add a comma and do the displayed components, and then we're going to be wanting to grab the date here. So when we didn't have the displayed components, or even if we kind of put it to hour and minute, you can kind of change what the user can kind of see. In this case, just having the date is going to be most ideal. We don't need to know the exact hour and minute from when they were born. I don't even remember what time I was born at. I don't think many people do know that exact time. If you do, hey, that's pretty cool. Essentially built our very, very simple form. If we really want to, we can go outside of this section and we can add another section for the toggle and the kind of submit button really quick. And then we'll go through the validation. So let's make a section. We won't give this one a name. Let's add a brace and we can add a toggle. We can add some text here. I agree to terms, or even like TOS, terms of service. Then we're going to apply for the value when it's on. So for that Boolean value, so I'll say is on. It's going to be that binding of agreed to terms. And then we'll add one more section here, which will be for our submit. And you can feel free to add any little titles or customization here. We're going to add a button, which will say submit. And then this is where you would have any of your actions. So in this case, if you want to take them to another view, if you want to have a pop-up show up, etc., send that information somewhere. I'm going to keep it really simple and just put form submitted. Alrighty, so we have our basic form. We can even have our toggle. We can see our date and time picker, our password. If we put things in here, it's kind of blanked out. Now let's quickly talk about validation. So something you might even want to do in a separate Swift file, I'm just going to keep it all in one Swift file today, is to create an enum to kind of track the different validation results. So I'm going to call this one validation result. Go ahead and add our brace, and we want to have a couple cases. The first case is on success. And the other case we want to have is failure. And we're actually going to make this a string value here within the brackets. We're also going to create a variable of error message, which is going to be a string. We're going to make this optional. We might not always have this, right? If we have all the information, we should be good to go. We're going to actually create a switch here. We love using switches with our enums, and this is going to be for the self value. Our first case is going to be upon success. We're going to go ahead and return nil. And in the other case of failure, we're going to want to have a string be passed along. That's why we include it in those brackets there. And we're going to go ahead and send a message. I'm just going to call this MSG, and then we'll go ahead and return MSG. So this is going to let us check fields individually and display custom responses. So if the email doesn't have like the proper formatting, the password's too short, days in the future, things like that. Let's go ahead and create some functions in order to check if the name's empty, to validate email, etc. So we're going to scroll down and we're going to go to the very, very bottom, just before the last brace within our view. And let's go ahead and create a function for validating name. So we just call it validate name. We're going to go ahead and return. So we're going to use that dash in that kind of angled bracket. And that's going to be for the validation result, which is why we created that enum. We'll go ahead and add a brace and we'll say the name dot is empty. And we're going to use our ternary operator here. So if it is empty, it's going to be a failure. And for that message, that string value, we're going to go ahead and say name is required. And then we're going to use our colon to basically say otherwise. So if name's empty, we're going to display that message. Otherwise, it's going to be the success case and there shouldn't be a message. Cool. Outside of this, let's make another function. And we'll call this one validate email. We're going to use a lot of the same logic. So we're going to go ahead and return the validation result, add a brace. All right, and we're actually going to be using regex in this case to kind of validate our email. There's a couple different ways you can do this, but I figured let's talk a little bit about regex, especially if you're looking for certain conditions. So we're going to establish an email pattern. So we're going to do let email pattern equals, and instead of just going right into the string value, instead we're going to do the hashtag. Then we're going to add our quotation marks. Now, when we press space or start typing, we can kind of see that it's added it to the other side as well. When we're working with regex, we actually start at the beginning of the string, and we establish that by using I believe this is the exponent symbol. It kind of looks like a little hat, or Shift-6 on your keyboard. And then what we're going to be doing is adding some code for the regex to look at. So the first little bit is we're going to add a / in order to kind of separate the values we're looking for. We're going to do the S plus. So the /s matches any non-white space character, which is the inverse of / lowercase s, and then the plus means one or more. We're then going to do the @ symbol, and this is a literal symbol for the @ sign. So when we have things like emails, it's always usually @something.com, required for every single email address. We're then going to do another / and do s plus again. So we're looking for another one or more non-white space character. So this is the domain name part before the dot, like Gmail, my site, example, whatever. We're then going to add another / and we're going to do the dot, which is just looking for the period. We're escaping it with the / because period by itself matches any character, and we want to match the actual dot in the email address. And then we're going to do another /s plus. So we're looking for another non-white space character, which represents a top level domain or a TLD. So .com, net, org, co.uk. And then we're going to go ahead and add another $ here, which basically says end of the string. This ensures that matching ends at the very end of the input, so nothing actually comes after. We have to end with that .com or .ca and things like that. This essentially matches strings that start with non-white space characters, include an @ symbol, have one more non-white space characters, include a period, and end with more non-white space characters. So we're using this regex to really handle that validation for the email. Like I said, there's a couple different ways you can do this. This is just a cool way that you can explore regex. And next we're going to create an if statement, so we can actually track if the email's in range. The Apple Intelligence has it pretty correct here. So we're going to do the email.range. Then we're going to do of, and we're looking for that email pattern, comma. We're going to include some options here. We're going to do .regular expression. Outside of this, we're going to say equals nil, add our brace, and we'll go ahead and return the failure. And we can give the message of enter a valid email. Essentially, this is going to bounce back an error if the email doesn't match our regex pattern. Oh, I'm sorry, this is supposed to be equals nil. That's right, we want the exact match. And then otherwise, we'll go outside this brace and we'll say return .success. Let's go ahead and hop out of this function and create another one for validating the password. Empty brackets, return the validation result. You notice a little bit of a pattern here. So we'll basically say if the password is less than 8 symbols, or I guess characters, we'll go ahead and return a failure. Otherwise, we can return success. So if password.count is less than 8, and add a brace, we can return the case of failure. And we'll say password must be at least 8 characters. And then in the other case, outside of that brace, we'll go ahead and return success. And the last one we want to do here is validating the birth date to make sure it can't be in the future, right? That doesn't make sense. So we'll validate the birth date. Empty brackets, return validation result, add a brace. We'll say if birth date, which is that variable we've created before, is greater than date value. Oh, it should be date with a capital D. Add our brace, and we'll return the failure message. .failure. Birthday cannot be in future. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and return success. All right, so we've created these functions. Now we actually need to implement them within our code. So we're going to be doing some more if statements, and we're going to be using if let just for a little bit of safety. So let's go ahead and scroll on up here to our text fields. For our name, we're going to be using the validate name. So after the text field, we're going to go ahead and create an if let statement. We're going to call this error, and this is going to equal the validate name dot error message. That's that error message property we've created. Another great reason to use the enums. And essentially now we're going to show error if the name is invalid. We'll include some text, which will only appear when there is an error. And we're going to pass through that error message through. We can see the name is required. And let's also go ahead and give it some foreground style. And we'll make it red so it kind of pops out. This is pretty common for, when things are, missing or there's an error, right? Red's a pretty known color for that. Now we can see that when it is empty here, hey, name is required. As soon as we start typing, that does go away. So that if let statement is going to be really great for helping us. And we're going to be repeating this pattern as we go. So for the email one, if let error equals validate email dot error message, and add the brace. And honestly, we can actually save a lot of time here because we're just going to be passing through that error, right? We've already done all the work. We can see enter a valid email. For the password, you guessed it, if let error equals validate password this time, dot error message, add our brace. Let's go ahead and paste our text of error. Look at that. We are coding so quickly now. If let error equals, oh, what did we call this one? I forget. We just made it validate birthday. There we go. Validate birthday dot error message. Go ahead and add our brace and paste our text here. Now for the birthday, because it is on the current date and we don't have that specific time, it's actually just comparing the value of right now against right now at the exact same point in time. So it's actually not going to bounce back that error, but we can see if we do manually check it. If we do manually change it to like the day ahead, birthday cannot be in the future. So you might even want to kind of update this to even be like, hey, if birthday from this day or this range, right? Because if someone's literally being born right now, I don't think they're filling out this form anyway. So you can kind of play around with the logic a little bit more if you'd like. Let's go ahead and now create a computed property to determine the overall form of validity. So above our function of validate name, let's go ahead and create a new variable. And we're going to call this one isFormValid, which is going to be a bool, right? Is it valid, yes or no, true or false? And we're going to actually add our square brackets here because we're going to be looking for a whole bunch of different conditions. And essentially we're going to be looking at our validate name. Let's separate all these with comma, the validate email, validate the password, and also that birth date. And outside of the square brackets here, we're going to actually use the dot all satisfy. So it's going to return a Boolean value indicating whether or not every element of a sequence is valid. I don't want this bracket. I don't want anything within here. Instead, we're going to add a brace and we're going to say if case dot success. We're looking for the success case for all of these. We're going to go ahead and return with our $0, brace, return true. I'm going to add an else statement here, return false. So this is going to go ahead and help us look for the case of if everything is successful, all of those different elements within the array returning true. Otherwise, if one, all, or any mixture of them aren't all true, then we're going to go ahead and return false. And we can use this actually for our toggle, and actually we can use this for our submit as well. So if we go to our button where we're actually submitting, we can go after this button and do a dot disabled, and this can be tracked by the isFormValid, and we're actually going to be using the opposite of this. We're going to do the exclamation point for the isFormValid. Now you notice we have all these within functions, but then within our toggle of agree to terms, we haven't actually tracked whether or not this is required. We can fix this by going to our all satisfy. We can go to the end of the braces here, and we can do our double ampersand to say and agreed to terms. So all of these things have to be satisfied and they have to agree to the terms. Then the isFormValid will be true. You guys use the preview here. I find simulator typically works best because sometimes when you're working in the preview, it can kind of like bounce back and reset your data. But let's go ahead and test our application. All right, let's go ahead and make sure that our logic works. So with our name, it is required. I'm going to put the name of Bob. The message disappears. The email is essentially we're looking for text before the @ symbol. So we have to have at least something here. Then looking for said @ symbol. And then we want a something. So even if we did Bob, Gmail, whatever, we're then looking for the dot and looking for any text after the dot for a domain name. Right? So even if it's Bob at bob.bob, that's still satisfying for our email condition. This should also make it flexible for different email kind of suffixes or domain names. And for a password, we can see we can type whatever. It must be at least 8 characters. Once it's 8 or higher, we are good to go there. Our birthday, again, it's kind of tracking the day. If we make it in the 9th, it's fine. If we make it sometime in the future, birthday cannot be in the future. All good there. And we still can't, let's fix our birthday. And we still can't submit until we agree to the terms of service. We can hit submit. Yay, we've printed form submitted. All right, so that is our basic form validation. I have a few more tips before I let you go. So the first tip would be to, when we're looking at things like email and password, we can actually use the dot auto correction disabled, as well as the dot text input auto capitalization to be never false or characters. You can actually get like a lot of customization with this. So for things like emails and passwords, this is a really great quality of life thing to consider. I would also, on these error fields here, I would include things like the dot accessibility label, and you can actually even just pass through the error value there. Just for people who are using screen readers, they'll be able to identify those different errors. This is a really great accessibility feature. So you might also want to highlight any active or invalid fields with a dot overlay or dot border. So for example, if we want to do dot overlay here, and then within the brackets, we can have it be the validate name dot error message is not equal to, so exclamation point equals, mine kind of looks like a slashed equal sign there. So if it's not equal to nil, then we'll add our question mark for our ternary operator. We would then have our rounded rectangle. We can include some corner radius. Let's have it be like 12. And we can add a stroke of the color dot red. And then we would have our otherwise just be nil. Let's go ahead and refresh our preview here. Okay, we might have to, make the corner radius a little bit different, but we can see here when the name is required, it kind of has this like little red outline. And if we do put Bob in there, it's no longer highlighted. So you might want to experiment with kind of like the overlays or even the borders. Borders might work a little bit better here to kind of signify to the users also like, hey, this is the field that you do need to fill in. So not only do you have the error message, but you also have a little bit more of a visual feedback. So today we learned how to validate each field individually, create a real-time accessible feedback with the visuals, with the kind of messages, and also do consider using the different UI UX components like the auto correction, auto capitalization, etc., as well as where appropriate for these text messages, including accessibility labels for screen readers. And you kind of really built some very robust form logic in SwiftUI. And we also learned a little bit about Regex. Regex can be pretty cool to kind of dive on into. So if you're ever curious about Regex, I would definitely look into it for different form validations and looking for certain things within text. It can be very, very detailed. So like and subscribe for more SwiftUI tutorials. Drop a comment if you want a follow-up on customizing forms for style, layout, or reusability. Because right now, we got some cool visuals, but kind of just the black and white. You can make that a whole lot cooler. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.